This is on. There we go. Good morning. My name is Joel Wipperfurth. I'm an ag technology lead for Land O'Lakes. Some of you might recognize the subsidiary brand Winfield United. We cover about 50% of the U.S. row crops. We would be the wholesale distributor for crop protection and seed products for about 50% of the U.S. row crops. We touch about 25% of the U.S. producers in that space and have about 800 member co-ops. So we're a cooperative at our heart. As a technology company, we've made several acquisitions over the last couple of years, and we also have a place called AnswerTech, or you can go to answertech.com, where we're helping bring ag tech companies and giving them access to market. So thank you.
So just one quick request. Let's just keep our comments short, and you don't need to stand up.
Okay.
There we go.
Hi, I'm Kiersten Stead. I'm an investment director with Monsanto Growth Ventures. So we are the venture capital group for Monsanto. We make minority equity investments in emerging agricultural companies. We invest across technology stacks, and so we're domain experts in agriculture. So we have investments in everything from biotechnologies and new crops all the way through to software, hardware, and anything in between. Anything that touches or improves the process of agriculture is where we've been making investments.
Hello, my name is Baptiste Tellier. I'm an agronomist, but I work also for Fallline Capital. Fallline is a private equity fund based here in San Mateo, California. We're specialized in row crop farmland investment and management. We invested in we acquired multiple farms across the country, and we're still deploying capital, and we do the management of these farms directly. We don't operate. We work with local farmers to operate these farms. That's 90% of our activity, and 10% of our activity is more typical ag tech, private equity type of activity. So we do invest directly in ag tech startups, mainly who have something to do with row crop production.
Yeah, my name is Vishal Vesus. I am one of the co-founders of Obvious Ventures. Obvious has roots in Valley here for incubating companies like Twitter. 3.5, 4 years ago, we started our first fund. Now we are on our second fund. The whole reason of being is, our belief is that purpose-driven businesses which are solving big problems of our times are going to outperform their peers. We focus on 3 different themes of investments. One is around sustainable systems. Around that practice, we have AgTech, health and wellness. Around that, we focus on food tech. And then third area is people power, where we look at future of work, future of money, and future of learning as a theme. So that's what we do. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jeff Eisenberg from Ecosystem Integrity Fund. Ecosystem Integrity Fund is a sustainability-focused venture capital firm based in San Francisco. We're currently investing out of our third fund. We've been doing venture capital and sustainability for probably 8 years now. In terms of ag and areas we look at, we do look at it from a sustainability angle, how we can make processes and the growing of crops better, cleaner, faster, more efficient. I think, unlike some other funds, we do look at sort of the human health aspect of things. So we look for green chemistry technologies that reduce the toxic effects of agriculture, in addition to the other things that I mentioned. We're typically leading Series A and Series B rounds, and we're looking for good companies.
Morning, Aaron Ratner with Ultra Capital. We are a sustainability infrastructure project finance firm, which means that we don't invest in corporate equity, but we deploy capital to help companies in the ag tech sector, among others, scale up their deployment of their operations. We focus on waste, water, agriculture, and energy. Ag tech often touches several of those at once. Within the ag tech space, we look at everything from production efficiencies to waste treatment of manure, converting that into energy, and then more recently, we've spent a lot of time looking at converting agriculture waste into valuable, marketable products.
Thank you, guys. Baptiste, I want to ask you, you guys do venture capital a little bit differently. You invest in companies, tech companies. You also invest in land. Could you sort of help us explain what you guys exactly do, and how does one help the other?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, both really feed each other. We are users of technology for our sourcing when it comes to trying to find farms to invest in, for the management of our farms also, and for the underwriting. So But from time to time, we come across problems for our tenants or for our own sourcing that cannot be fixed with the current technology or current techniques. So that's when we start to look for teams and startups who work on these problems. And sometimes we invest in these startups. And we can also provide some feedback to these companies because we do own farmland. We are really in a close touch with the row crop farming community, so we can test the product, give some feedback to the different companies we invested in. Sometimes it's a bit the opposite. Sometimes we get a very good pitch from a young team who, bring to us a problem that we didn't think could be fixed with technology or with new solutions. And we're like, well, that's interesting, what you're doing. So let's dig up a bit into that, and maybe let's invest in you guys. And sometimes it's not just the right fit as an investment, and we're just a customer, but kind of advanced customer because we do have the technical expertise, but also the business background to give background to these different companies.
Do you specifically look for companies that could actually help both sides of your business? Is that a requirement?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we did see some very. From time to time, we see some really good companies who work on solutions that don't really match our main activity, which is investing in farmland and managing row crop farms. So we do invest only in companies that provide solutions that we can be customer of or user of. Yeah.
Cool. Vishal, wanted to ask you about food. Just before coming here, we were talking about food and your interest in food. And I mean, from an investment perspective, could you talk about some of the...
I love eating food.
I was going to say that seems obvious, but it doesn't, right? Bad joke. Could you talk about some of the investments you've made in the last year, particularly in the food sector? We're trying to understand where the investment dollars are going and why you're interested in those kind of deals.
Right. So in our food tech practice, there are broadly four things which we are interested in. I think one area of interest for us is we believe there's kind of a macro shift happening from an industrialized food system, which has given us calories at a price point which are very attractive, but there have been a lot of negative externalities in terms of human health and environmental cost. And so we think we'll move towards in next 10-15 years to much more kind of distributed, decentralized models where you'll have much more fresher food, more nutritious food, but at scale. And so in that context, we've invested in a couple of companies. Like one company we invested is a company called Urban Remedy, which is building a multi-channel brand here in Bay Area. You store in Whole Foods and retail stores as well as direct to consumer shipping. So that's one company around that theme. Second company is Good Eggs, which we just invested. This is really growing fast here in Bay Area. They're reimagining grocery stores. So that's kind of one area defines a food tech thesis. Second area is we believe like millennials are going to kind of build new brands the same way boomers built brands in past. And so in that context, we're looking for next generation consumer brands. So one of the companies which we invested in is Ollie, which is in the supplement space, and they're one of the fastest growing companies in country today in that category. Third area of focus for us is as consumer behavior changes, I think there's going to be innovation in product. And so one of the areas we've been very bullish about is plant-based proteins. So we're investors in Beyond Meat around that thesis. And lastly, we've not invested, but we're very interested in is food and food safety and transparency in supply chain. On how do you make sure as food becomes more decentralized, how do you ensure quality and consistency of the product? So that's our thesis.
Thank you. Kiersten, you were just talking about your areas of interest. Obviously, you guys are very deep subject matter experts. So you're not looking for companies that are just focused on ag. You're looking for companies that are broader, but can bring value to ag. Could you talk about that and correct me if I'm wrong?
Sure. So I think we're a little bit like, sort of what Fall Line was talking about, in that we both are outward looking to customers, to farm customers, both in specialty and row crop, but we also have a large internal business that we have needs and technology needs as well. And so that provides both, entrepreneurs the opportunity to test and try things internally on R&D fields, like all of the sort of big ag companies have. And we have fields set aside to specifically trial, the weird and wonderful that are coming out of the early startup world. But we also have, significant needs that any sort of enterprise have. And agriculture is unlike other businesses in that it's actually a pretty small business. There's a few number of players, so there's not a lot of sort of purpose-built technology for agriculture. And so we're pretty interested in looking at things like logistics technologies coming out to help improve our internal supply chain, but also make really good investments because they serve a broader number of industries. And actually we like that. We don't necessarily have to invest in companies where their only vertical that they're serving is agriculture. And so I think that's something that people don't necessarily understand, is that we're sort of looking both into the agricultural industry in terms of what those enterprises need, and then both externally at customers and what the customers' problems and how we can help solve those as well.
So ag could be one vertical that you go after, but you don't have to be purely ag focused.
That's correct. We have a number of investments where when I initially met them, they were not in agriculture. So they were serving insurance. So we have, for example, we made an investment in a company called Understory Weather that was they have building weather stations that take 3,000 measurements a second with no moving parts. Right? We're perfectly happy for them to go out and sell to other agricultural companies, insurance industry, governments, and that's what they're doing. But we want to make sure that company exists, and because there's a great need for it sort of internally at the company, we also think it's a good investment. So there's investments like that where agriculture is only a part of what they're going to do.
Very cool. Geoffrey, moving on to you and talking about sustainability, is it a similar story that you're looking for broad-based sustainability, or is it focused on ag? Could you talk about your investment thesis?
Yeah, so it is a broad-based sustainability thesis, and I think what makes us a little bit different maybe from other venture capitalists is a firm belief that the way we're going to achieve true sustainability across the economy and in our society is by changing the large incumbent industries to be more sustainable. So not displacing sort of the ag system as it exists today, but moving it in a more sustainable direction and transforming it over time. Big systems, they typically don't just like shift on a dime, and when they do, bad things happen. There are a lot of unintended consequences. And so what that means is we often are looking for incremental improvements to existing systems where a relatively small amount of capital can have a large leveraged effect on moving an existing industry in a direction that we think is more sustainable. So that can be, decreasing water use or increasing the nutritional content or increasing soil health, but not trying to put Monsanto out of business necessarily. And so that's, I think, maybe a little bit of a different approach. And so what that means is we're typically dealing with folks who are in that industry, know it well. They're not coming in from the outside and trying to apply some whiz-bang technology they invented at a university to the field. It's folks who have been in ag for a long time, have seen a problem, have seen an inefficiency, and have come up with or partnered with innovators to come up with a solution for an existing problem, an existing market problem that also happens to be a sustainability problem.
Thank you. Aaron, you and I were chatting offline. We were talking about challenges with venture capital in ag, particularly with fast-growing companies or not in certain cases. Indoor ag may be an example. And you had some other ideas of financing companies of that kind. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, sure. So, in full disclosure, we are a project finance investment firm, so this is my drinking my own Kool-Aid. But, particularly with organic processes that actually require either the rotation of the earth or plants to grow over time, there are situations where within AgTech, the traditional sort of venture capital to growth equity model is not the optimal capital structure for these companies. So Ultra was designed to accelerate the deployment of private capital really at the project level. Indoor ag is a great example. There's a lot of indoor agriculture developers out there who can get a purchase order with a big box retailer. They can figure out how to sell the product. They can pick the equipment. But then what they really need is $100 million to go and build that infrastructure. And for a small developer who has very little value other than the contracts they put in place, raising $100 million is impossible from a private equity firm, and the banks really aren't lending at this point. So we're able to step in. We provide project level equity, and it requires us to really be very hands off with the developers we work with, because at the project level you actually have no controls over the parent company. But it ends up being a much more efficient cost of capital for developers and startups that are trying to deploy their product or service rapidly and have already figured out the tech part of their strategy.
Thank you, Aaron. Joel, there's a lot of money going on into tech, particularly in AgTech, FinTech, and many other technologies. You guys at Land O'Lakes, I don't know if you guys have a venture fund, but you help companies a lot in terms of going to market, which is the other side of the venture capital job, is invest money and then help them. Could you talk about that? Because you're a lot more than Land O'Lakes, correct?
Yeah, so Land O'Lakes with 4 divisions: Purina Animal Nutrition, the Dairy Foods division. Some of you may recognize Land O'Lakes Butter, and then Sustain Group, which was just brought on. And Sustain Group is looking for technology solutions that help us deliver sustainable solutions throughout our business. And one of the biggest opportunities that division has is connecting supply chains and being able to help people benchmark where they are in the world. If you're a producer growing corn and soybeans, or if you're trying to sell directly to a food manufacturer. So we don't do a venture capital fund. We do it a little differently. We're a brand company. We're all about the brand. And one of the things that we can provide is access to market. So the core competency as you bring a technology, a product to market, is that we can help amplify the message through connecting with our 800 member owners in the countryside that touch the grower every day. I think the biggest opportunity that tech has to find its way is figure out who pays, right? And everybody, as they're looking for a customer, they look throughout the supply chain for who pays, and sometimes they get it wrong. Sometimes they go direct to the grower. Growers aren't, at this time, willing to pay for technology as it stands. And so figuring out in that supply chain who pays is a key aspect of what we help with.
Can you give us some examples of that? Because the question always is, how do you get farmers to pay? And I think what I'm hearing from you is you don't. Can you give some examples where somebody else is paying for a product?
Yeah, so an example, we purchased a company, Geosys, or a satellite imagery procurement company, and we offer this to ag retailers. Some of the ag retailers have taken it and said, look, we can help provide you more information about the seeds that we're selling you from some of the best breeding companies in the business, Monsanto, Dow, and Syngenta, and we can help you get the most yield out of those genetics. And whether or not they charge them for the business and say, oh, it's $1 per acre for the satellite imagery, or wrap it in with the seed cost, that helps them achieve that seed's full potential. So that's an example where we've let the ag retailer decide what their local market is. And, on the contrast to that, some ag retailers have charged $15 per acre for an aggregated umbrella brand of precision ag or decision ag technologies.
Very cool. So before we take a look at the future and see where investments are going to go according to our panel, I'd like to hear about what happened in the last year. It's literally a year from our last panel on this very exact motive. So I'd love to hear about one investment you guys have made in that time period, and why you think that sector is going to be hot. Kiersten, you want to start?
Sure. Wow, past the year. So we made a few investments this year. As I mentioned before, we were pretty interested in sort of logistics and sort of looking downstream at farmers' decisions going sort of post-farm gate and after that. And so in that light, we made a really interesting marketplace investment this year, a company called FarmLead, which is a automated grain trading marketplace. This is farmers spend a significant portion of their time marketing and trading their product. It's how they immediately generate revenue. So per your comment, they get paid immediately for using this, which is a very appealing investment. And then we've been looking broadly sort of at different adjacencies along in that area, sort of supply chain management and downstream problems that need to be filled. And we're looking at, there's some technology advancements that have happened over the recent, the last sort of 18 months that are enabling sort of a different generation of technology in that space.
Very cool. So ag marketplaces. Baptiste, what about you?
Yeah, one of our last investment was investment in a company called Trace Genomics. They are specialized in trying to map the soil microbiology. To answer a few questions, well, first, like what do we have in our soils? A lot of people in the last years have been talking about soil health and how it is important to have a good soil health. Well, the definition is not that clear. And that company provides some insight about, okay, what are exactly the bacteria and the fungus and the other microbe that you have in your soil. And they'll try to predict also potential disease to help the farmers to make better decisions on their either seed treatment, crop protection, or just may also seed choice. So we're really excited about this company.
Very cool.
Yeah, so we, around 9 months ago, invested in Good Eggs, and one of our really good friends, who was the number 2 guy at Plum Organics, became the CEO of the company. And we are a big fan of this guy. His name is Bentley Hall. We've been wanting to do something with him. And we ended up partnering with him and kind of in a very, very crowded market, building a point of view which we got excited about. And what Good Eggs is basically doing is they are a platform which partners with artisanal product makers as well as like the fresh produce makers, and on the same day you are able to kind of get your groceries delivered at home. And these products are if Whole Foods has products, they're like 90% fresher than Whole Foods. And so this company also is launching this whole one-stop solution of having grocery as well as meal kits as well as alcohol all in one space, for you to kind of do. So he's just done an incredible job, and so we've been really pleased by our investment over the last 9 months.
Geoffrey?
So we've had a thesis probably for the last 10 years around movement to indoor controlled agriculture in the United States. And I don't actually mean fully indoor enclosed. I generally mean greenhouse agriculture. So greenhouses in Northern Europe, if anyone's ever been there, been to the Netherlands, I mean, it's a major part of their agricultural system, and it's not something that has really broken into the United States, or it hadn't until, say, 5 years ago. And it's a similar thesis around consumer demand for fresh, locally grown, higher quality produce, especially higher value produce, combined with the fact that there are stresses on the growing regions for those products, specifically in California, specifically around water and climate. And so I'm talking about things like tomatoes and cucumbers, lettuces, strawberries, berries even. And so we've been looking at that space for a long time, and we found a company that we thought was the right kind of investment for us, for EIF, meaning capital efficient, didn't require a ton of money, but could have a real leveraging effect on that space, on bringing greenhouse agriculture to a more sustainable space, in this case, both economically and from an energy standpoint. So we invested in a company called Luma Grow, and Luma Grow has LED light fixtures where you can manipulate light spectrum over time. They're remotely controlled to provide ancillary lighting to greenhouses, and so in a lot of cases you need to have additional lights. Right now those lights are provided by a really inefficient technology called the high pressure sodium, which is essentially an incandescent light bulb, and what LEDs can do is they can cut the energy use by half, cut the excess heat, and manipulate light spectrum over the course of the life of whatever plant it is you're trying to grow, and you can actually increase quality and yield, color, whatever it is you want. And so this is a really important technology for making greenhouse greenhouse agriculture, more sustainable economically and from an energy perspective, and it's a company that's doing great. And I think like a lot of our investments, it is piggybacking on the cost curve coming down on another technology. So LEDs, people probably know the chips themselves have come down 90% in cost over the last 5 years, and Luma Grow is in a position to really take advantage of that, but we wouldn't invest in a LED chip company.
So we closed our first fund in February, so we're now just closing our first round of deals. But I think the one that I'm most excited about is a waste to value conversion play, where we're building a facility that's going to convert roughly 400,000 tons a year of high sugar agriculture waste. This is waste that's either left over in a field or post-production that has been literally rotting and converting into methane on its own, or fed as a very low nutritionally valuable feedstock to cattle. We're going to take that waste stream, effectively getting it almost for free, and convert it into ethanol and build a non-corn ethanol plant. So that we would not directly be in the ethanol business per se, but it's an example of what Oak Ridge Labs calls the billion-ton opportunity, which is 1 billion tons a year of biomass, of waste available in the United States that can be converted into either electricity, fuel, or industrial product without pulling away from the production cycle.
So we only have 5 minutes, and I want a couple of questions through. Love to hear what the panel thinks is going to be interesting for them from an investment perspective or an acquisition perspective over the next 6 months. So quick answer, and then I want to take some questions from the audience.
Can you say the question again? I couldn't.
The question is, what do you think is going to be interesting for you as an investor in the next 6 months to a year? What areas are you looking at which are particularly interesting that you haven't invested in, have not invested?
Well, I think I think I'm the type of person that thinks about what areas I think are the bets have been played or the bets have been laid more so than it's difficult to predict sort of what things you'll see and.
Oh, just give me an answer, please.
Yeah.
What are you guys investing in?
Yeah, what are we investing in? So I think
what's not public yet. Anything?
We'll talk about that later offline. So I think there's been a lot of interest in sort of the microbial biologicals space. I think that space is very difficult to enter now without a really differentiated product. I think decision making for AgTech is a real challenge now. I think that business model needs bearing out over the next probably 18 months. But I think there's opportunities to sort of amalgamate and aggregate those technologies. As I mentioned before, so I hate to kick a dead horse, we're pretty interested in sort of looking at internally developed technologies that'll help sort of the business as a whole function more efficiently. So logistics, supply chain, payment methods. I think globally, payment and
I'm just looking for one answer. If that's like, if you want to invest in one thing,
okay,
which is one sector, I'd love to hear from everyone. One sector.
I would say artificial intelligence in ag. That's something that we've seen that field taking off in some other sector of the industry. Not so much yet in ag. I think it has a great future in ag.
Vishal, more food?
So I'll try to kind of answer quickly here. Number one area of interest is software-led companies in supply chain, which improves your lives. Number two would be soil biome, which we're very interested in. And number three is computational biology as a space we've been spending a lot of time in.
Jeff?
So precision techniques, data collection, management techniques for pest control, specifically with the purpose of displacing expensive prophylactic spraying.
That's very specific.
Yeah. Don't anyone take those deals from me, okay?
Sounds like a patent you've just filed.
I know, right?
We overpay, so you can come here.
I think soil biome is really cool too. I feel like I don't know enough about it yet, but it is something we invested successfully in a probiotic beverage company, so I'm looking at soil from that perspective as well.
Sorry, Aaron?
Yeah, sure.
We're spending a lot of time right now on the future of protein, not so much protein consumed by humans. We think most people get too much protein, particularly in this country. But it's really about how we're going to feed our food sustainably. There's not enough land, there's not enough water. Crop yields per acre are really maxing out right now. So when you look at the global middle class with 2 billion people coming online, where they're going to get their chicken and fish and beef is extremely challenging.
That's a really good one. Joel?
Since I'm not doing any investing, I'll tell you, I think artificial intelligence is the new bacon. Okay? Apply it to anything, and it'll make your product instantly better. In 2006, I was reading an article, "You are your company" would have been the statement that you would have made to employees. In 2017, with artificial intelligence, "You are your training data." So I think artificial intelligence can be applied really well.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think that most of the software companies now are switching over to AI-based intelligence systems.
I would actually say most mobile companies switching over to AI. It used to be web, then it was mobile, and now it's AI, right?
So thinking about building an AI company for ag has, you're going to be solving a problem. I think that would be the specific message. When we speak at AI conferences now, we say solve a specific problem. This is the new software. Don't think it's anything more than that. It's just a different way of achieving an end goal. Yeah.
Awesome. We probably have a few minutes for questions from the audience. Go right ahead.
Hi.
You have a...
Great to see you with Fujitsu Labs. Great panel. I would love to hear more. We have a lot of big challenges to solve, hunger and nutrition, obviously the climate change, all these things. And so I think, one of the big challenges is how do we scale? We've got a lot of food waste issues too on one end, but the big challenge of scaling while also being...
sorry, you have a question?
Yes, sorry. The big challenge of scaling while also being eco-friendly and thinking about the environment and our health. You alluded to some of those challenges, but I'd love to hear a little more about what are the kind of magic convergences we need to see or breakthroughs to make that possible.
Amazing entrepreneurs who are thinking about moonshots which can change markets.
I think this is this is a business that uses 70%, arguably, give or take, of the world's fresh water, has a huge impact. I think every investment we've ever made is a strong sustainability play. So I don't think you need to make investments specifically for sustainability, because every efficiency you build in, every sort of intelligent advisor you build, every water use efficiency technology we've invested in, these are all sustainability plays, because agriculture we have this luxury of anything we can do to make it more efficient and make it better visibility, is better for the environment. So we don't talk about it a lot, but it's a strong side effect of being in this sector.
Geoffrey, any perspectives on that?
It's not often that I agree with the person from Monsanto and not the other clean tech investor, but no, I think that's the case. I think it's going to be everyone doing their part, everyone thinking about making their piece of agriculture more efficient, and then letting sort of the amazing scaling and optimization power of capitalist markets drive that forward. And things can change fast. I mean, if you look at what's happening in transportation, what's happening in AI, what happened in computers, I mean, once you get a lot of those incremental changes ready to go, and then they get sort of shot through the public market system, things can scale quickly.
Okay, so...
Go ahead.
Question. I grew up in the Netherlands, and I grew up on a farm. So I want to ask, how is your approach different than the Netherlands approach in agriculture? One of the biggest agricultural exporters in the world. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, Joel, can you repeat the question, and maybe you can...
I'm not going to answer, but I'll repeat
it. The question was, how is your approach in the U.S. different from the Netherlands?
Yeah,
exactly.
Joel, go ahead. Whoever wants to take it on.
Well, they're more, the European models are more constrained with land and resources, so they've had to be a lot more efficient, which is why a lot of interesting greenhouse innovation has come out of there. Whereas in the United States, post-World War II, you had a tremendous amount of land and water and resources made available with no consideration for the industrial byproducts to that production system.
I'll just follow up and say I intend to invest in sort of the transfer of technology from the Netherlands to U.S. applications. I think there's, to Aaron's point, especially in the indoor space, there's a lot that has been done in the Netherlands that should be done here and will be.
Go ahead.
For Aaron and the gentleman
Geoffrey too, but the whole panel, have you seen any deal flow for crops grown under cover have you seen any deal flow for crops grown under cover in closed loop systems to kind of satisfy the market for farm to market sustainable food around the U.S.? So it's the ultimate transfer of what comes from the Netherlands and Dalsumhoving over to the U.S.
Yeah, well, certainly indoor agriculture is really taking...
Aaron, can you just clarify the question for everyone?
Sure. I think I heard it. The question was, have you seen models where the indoor system is actually achieving production all the way to market? Is that roughly accurate? So yeah.
What are the key technologies that you're investing in?
Well, so in indoor agriculture, I mean, a lot of the technologies are around efficiencies of lighting and energy and just making that actually profitable enough versus an open field farm. That moment has now come. It actually is cheaper to produce lettuce on a square foot of indoor agriculture than out in a field in most cases. It's certainly much more consistent. This is also true on going back to the sustainable protein side around insect farming. So the insect farmers out there who are growing black soldier flies or crickets to create an alternative to fish meal are doing so at rates of efficiency that are, multiples above what you could grow corn and soy for to feed the same livestock.
Okay, we probably have time for one more question. Go ahead.
So overall, looking at the Go ahead. Thanks. Overall, looking at the areas, there is one IT, and then the other one is biologicals, let's say, to summarize. I was just wondering, both of them have different challenges in terms of adoption, scaling, very different types of funding. Do you see more companies in one area or the other, or do you prefer one area or the other in terms of investments?
Yeah, so both IT and biology, like you could build kind of AI-based software solutions. You could also build biology-based solutions, which have kind of much more longer, maybe R&D time in trying to kind of understand what the correlations are. However, there is also convergence. I think we have investors in a company called Zymergen, which is a biology company, but also is using robotic wet lab and machine learning as a way to kind of figure out what is the right microbe and train and figure out what's the better microbe through doing a lot of permutation combinations using a technology platform and then giving back the microbes to DuPonts of the world, right? So I think it's all about creativity of how do you build your business model, what's the problem in the industry, and how can you leverage these tools, upcoming tools, to solve those.
Yeah, I would agree that there's convergence on those two things coming together. We're seeing a lot of deal flow in that space. I think the one caveat there is that whenever you're looking at a life science sort of aspect to a business, whether it's the full aspect, that the domain expertise is significantly different there. The barrier to entry is higher, and so the number of companies with strong management teams are fewer in that space specifically.
I can't believe I have to be the wet blanket on the panel of optimists. As an agronomist in the field, when people talk about microbiomes and soil biology, keeping bugs in jugs alive through the supply chain when the truck goes over the Rocky Mountains and freezes halfway through and then winds up in a retailer's storage shed and they can't tell if they put it in heated storage or not, and then the farmer dumps it in with a salt-based solution starter fertilizer that has 3 insecticides in it. Somehow or another, there's a lot of challenges that don't make it out of the beaker. So I don't want to be the wet blanket, but I just want to let you know, like when I put it in my brother's planter on the farm, the bug might not be alive in the same part per million.
Well, interesting topic. We can dedicate a whole panel just for that. Thank you guys for coming here. Thank you to a wonderful panel.